There's something odd about the great outdoors, isn't there? The idea of escaping the noise of everyday life, trading city lights for starlit skies, and sleeping under a canopy of trees sounds peaceful until it isn't. Because when you're out there, miles from civilization, anything can happen. And for some unfortunate campers, their trips turned into nightmares they never woke up from. From unexplained disappearances to brutal encounters with nature, these are the most disturbing camping deaths in history. It was supposed to be an unforgettable weekend. 4 young friends camping under the stars, surrounded by the peaceful waters of Lake Bodom. But instead of a night filled with laughter and adventure, their trip turned into one of Finland's most chilling murder mysteries. On the night of June 4th, 1960, 2 15-year-old girls, Mila Emil Björklund and Anja Tuulikki-Mäki, along with their 18-year-old boyfriends, Seppo Antero Boisman and Niels Wilhelm Gustafsson, set up camp by the lake, eager to enjoy the beauty of nature. The air was warm, the lake still, and the group was in high spirits, completely unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. Sometime between 4 and 6 a.m., as the friends lay inside their small tent, an unknown force struck with brutal precision. The attack was swift and merciless. Mila, Anja, and Seppo were stabbed and bludgeoned in the dead of night, their bodies left in a gruesome state. The only survivor, Niels Gustafsson, was found barely clinging to life, suffering from a concussion, a shattered jaw, and multiple facial fractures. But the real mystery, the tent had not been cut open from the inside. The killer had struck from the outside, attacking them through the fabric before leaving them for dead. Morning arrived, and life went on as usual around Lake Bodom. A group of young birdwatchers, out exploring at sunrise, noticed the collapsed tent near the shoreline but thought nothing of it. As they walked past, they spotted a blonde-haired man quietly moving away from the site. Was it the killer? No one knew. It wasn't until 11 a.m., hours later, that a local carpenter, Risto Siren, stumbled upon the grisly crime scene and called the police. When authorities arrived, they were met with a horrific sight. Inside the blood-soaked tent, the bodies of Anja and Seppo lay lifeless. Outside, Mila's corpse had been dragged partially out of the tent, her clothes disheveled, stabbed even after death. Gustafsson, barely conscious, was found beside her, his injuries severe but not fatal. Strangely, the attacker had taken bizarre trophies. Keys to the teenagers' motorcycles had vanished, yet the bikes remained. Even more chilling, Gustafsson's shoes were missing, only to be discovered nearly half a mile away. Despite the brutality of the murders, the police investigation was a disaster from the start. Officers failed to secure the crime scene, allowing dozens of onlookers to trample through the area, contaminating evidence. By the time forensic teams arrived, crucial clues were lost forever. As the years passed, the case only grew darker. Whispers spread of a mysterious blonde man seen near the lake, a former KGB spy, some claimed. Another theory pointed to a local shopkeeper, known for his violent outbursts. Yet, no arrests were made. The Lake Bodom murders faded into legend, a cold case that haunted Finland for decades. Then, in 2004, 44 years after that fateful night, new forensic technology brought the case back to life. DNA evidence led police to an unexpected suspect, Niels Gustafsson, the lone survivor. The prosecution claimed that on the night of the attack, a drunken argument broke out between Gustafsson and Seppo Boisman. In a jealous rage, Gustafsson was beaten and humiliated by his friend, leaving him with a broken jaw. Enraged, they alleged, he snapped, murdering his friends in cold blood before injuring himself to stage the scene. The key piece of evidence? Gustafsson's shoes, found away from the campsite, were covered in the victim's blood, but not his own. The trial gripped the nation. Was he the sole survivor of a massacre, or the mastermind behind it? In October 2005, the jury reached its verdict, not guilty. The case against Gustafsson was deemed too weak, and he was acquitted, walking away a free man. The Finnish government later compensated him nearly 44,900 euros for wrongful accusation and the trauma of the trial. But to this day, the true identity of the killer remains unknown. No other suspects have ever been charged. No new evidence has emerged. On the night of August 17, 1980, the vast ancient lands of Uluru in Australia's Northern Territory lay silent under the moonlight. But that silence was about to be shattered forever. The Chamberlain family, Lindy, Michael, and their 3 children, had set up camp near the towering monolith, unaware that within hours, their lives would descend into a nightmare of unimaginable horror and relentless injustice. 9-week-old Azaria Lauren Chamberlain had been peacefully sleeping in the family tent when, suddenly, a scream pierced the still night. Lindy rushed to the tent, her heart pounding, only to be met with a sight that would haunt her forever. A dingo slinking away into the darkness. The unthinkable had happened. "A dingo's got my baby!" she cried, her voice trembling with terror. But the nightmare was only just beginning. 3 separate witnesses would later confirm hearing a baby's desperate cries that night. Dingo tracks were found leading to and from the tent, their imprints pressed into the sandy earth. Bloodstains, Azaria's, covered the tent's mattress, her carry basket, and the ground where she had been sleeping. The signs were clear. A dingo had taken the infant. Indigenous and white trackers followed the trail, discovering drag marks in the sand and shallow indentations, suggesting the dingo had briefly rested. Near these imprints were dark patches that would later be suspected to be blood. Yet, from the very beginning, whispers of doubt and suspicion began to swirl. The idea of a dingo attacking a baby was met with skepticism by police, by the media, by the public. Despite the initial inquest concluding that a wild animal had indeed taken Azaria, some officers were determined to prove otherwise. They dismissed the evidence and instead turned their focus onto the Chamberlains themselves, convinced that the grieving parents, Lindy in particular, were hiding something sinister. 8 months later, a nationwide police operation was launched. The Chamberlains' home was ransacked, their belongings seized. Witnesses who had previously spoken about the dingo attack were re-interrogated, pressured to change their statements. Investigators ignored anything that pointed to the dingo, instead crafting a narrative that was more sensational, more sinister. The second inquest, rather than clarifying events, took a shocking turn. Instead of reaffirming the initial findings, authorities threw the Chamberlains under suspicion, ultimately charging Lindy with murder and Michael as an accessory. It seemed absurd. How could a mother, whose baby had been snatched from her tent, now be accused of killing her own child? But the media had already convicted her in the court of public opinion. The trial began on February 13, 1982, and quickly turned into a spectacle. The prosecution claimed Lindy had slit Azaria's throat in the family car and hidden her body in a camera case, an accusation built on dubious forensic evidence. They pointed to traces of what they claimed was fetal hemoglobin found in the Chamberlains' vehicle, later revealed to be nothing more than chemical residue from soundproofing material. The defense presented eyewitnesses, expert testimonies, and logical explanations, but it didn't matter. The court had already made up its mind. On October 29, 1982, Lindy Chamberlain was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. Michael Chamberlain was convicted as an accessory and received a suspended sentence. Their children, Aidan and Reagan, were left without a mother, their family torn apart by a web of lies and injustice. For years, Lindy sat behind bars, condemned for a crime she did not commit. The Chamberlains' appeals were repeatedly denied, their cries for justice falling on deaf ears. But fate was not finished with this story. In 1986, a miracle emerged from the very land that had swallowed Azaria whole. Her torn and blood-stained jacket, one the prosecution claimed never existed, was discovered near a dingo den, buried in the rugged terrain. With this damning revelation, the walls of deception began to crumble. Lindy was released from prison on September 15, 1988, and 2 years later, her conviction was overturned. Yet, the battle was far from over. In 1995, a third investigation still failed to clear Azaria's cause of death. The Chamberlains continued to fight, determined to have the truth recognized. Finally, on June 12, 2012, over 3 decades after that fateful night, Coroner Elizabeth Morris officially ruled that Azaria Chamberlain had been taken and killed by a dingo, a tragic yet long overdue confirmation of what Lindy had said all along. Though Lindy received $1.3 million in compensation for wrongful imprisonment, no amount of money could erase the torment, the shattered reputation, the years lost. What should have been a case of tragic misfortune had turned into one of Australia's most infamous miscarriages of justice. Trevor Holinski was a 20-year-old with an unbreakable bond with nature. The wilderness wasn't just a passion for him, it was his way of life. His documentary, A Blue Crow, captured his survival skills and deep respect for the wild. And soon, he was set to embark on his next great adventure, joining the Marines. But before taking that step, he craved one last escape into the outdoors, a final taste of the untamed world he loved. So, in August 2015, he and his friend Sheldon Stewart set out for Bucks Lake in Northern California, unaware that this journey would end in blood and fire. Trevor's mother, Allison, recalled the excitement in his voice when he talked about the trip. He had no idea he was walking into his own nightmare. The lake shimmered under the setting sun as Trevor and Sheldon pitched their tent. The air was crisp, the forest alive with the rustling of leaves and distant calls of wildlife. But as the night fell, something changed. The two had taken LSD and marijuana, and as the drugs took hold, their reality blurred into something dark and chaotic. What happened next remains shrouded in mystery, but one thing is certain. By morning, one of them would be dead. In the early hours of August 22, 2015, firefighters responded to a raging brush fire near Bucks Lake. As they fought to contain the flames, they stumbled upon something chilling. Near the smoldering remains of a campsite, they found a man, Sheldon Stewart, his neck covered in deep stab wounds. But that wasn't the most horrifying discovery. Just feet away, within the fire pit, lay a burned body. Smoke still curled from the charred remains, the air thick with the sickening stench of scorched flesh. It was Trevor. Investigators arrived at the grisly scene and immediately sensed that something sinister had taken place. When they questioned Sheldon, his story was disjointed, riddled with inconsistencies. He claimed Trevor had attacked him, forcing him to defend himself, but the evidence whispered a different tale, one of calculated violence, betrayal, and an attempted cover-up. The autopsy revealed the brutal truth. Trevor had been stabbed multiple times before being set on fire. His body bore no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds. The scene suggested something far more disturbing than a mere fight gone wrong. Investigators scoured the area and soon uncovered damning evidence. Trevor's wallet and ID buried near the campsite, alongside the very knife used to kill him. And then there was Sheldon's own wounds, shallow cuts that medical experts determined were likely self-inflicted. The noose tightened around Sheldon as detectives pressed him for answers. His version of events kept shifting. First, he insisted he acted in self-defense. Then, he claimed Trevor had made unwanted advances. But with each revision of his story, he only sank deeper into suspicion. Finally, the trial began, and Sheldon's fate was left in the hands of a jury. His defense tried to argue that the drugs had warped his perception, that he had only lashed out in fear, but the prosecution tore through those claims. They painted a picture of a man who, under the influence, had committed an unspeakable act and tried to erase the evidence in flames. Then came the final, chilling confession. Sheldon admitted that Trevor had asked him to end his misery. The meaning of those words remains unclear, a cryptic message lost to the chaos of that night. But the jury had heard enough. The verdict? Guilty. First-degree murder, arson. Sheldon Stewart was sentenced to 26 years to life, his fate sealed in the very courtroom where justice for Trevor was finally served. But for Trevor's family, the pain never faded. A mother's grief, a life stolen too soon, a promising future reduced to ashes in a campfire pit. One final adventure, one final betrayal, and a truth that still haunts the woods of Bucks Lake to this day. The Eastern family had looked forward to this trip for months, a peaceful retreat deep in the Boise National Forest, a break from the noise and chaos of daily life. The tall pines swayed gently, the crackling campfire cast flickering shadows, and the cool night air wrapped around their tents as they drifted off to sleep. But in the early hours of September 9th, 2023, their world shattered. At 5 a.m., while the forest was still cloaked in darkness, a loud, sickening crack echoed through the trees. It was the kind of sound that made your stomach drop before your brain could even process what it meant. Within seconds, a massive cottonwood tree, weakened by age and fire damage, came crashing down onto the tent where 8-year-old Cadence Easton and her faithful dog, Zell, lay sleeping. By the time anyone could react, it was already too late. A family friend, who had been camping nearby, was jolted awake by the sound. Rushing to the scene, he arrived just as the frantic shouts of Cadence's parents, Quinn and Natasha, filled the air. Flashlights flickered in the darkness, illuminating the horrifying sight, a tent crushed beneath the monstrous weight of the fallen tree. Emergency responders from the Elmore County Sheriff's Office arrived swiftly, but there was nothing they could do. Cadence was pronounced dead at the scene. Her loyal companion, Zell, never left her side, not even in death. The grief was unbearable. Cadence wasn't just another child. She was a ray of sunshine to those who knew her. Her family described her as endlessly curious, quick-witted, and filled with an infectious joy that could lift even the darkest moods. She had a special connection with animals, a deep love for nature, and an ability to make friends wherever she went. Her twin sister London was devastated. The two had been inseparable since birth, sharing an unspoken bond that only twins understand. And now, half of that connection was gone, taken by an act of nature so sudden, so cruel, it seemed almost impossible to comprehend. As officials surveyed the scene, they couldn't ignore the eerie truth. The tree that fell had been rotting for some time. Its weakened core, likely damaged by previous wildfires, had turned it into a silent, ticking time bomb, waiting for the perfect moment to collapse. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Were there warning signs that had gone unnoticed? The authorities launched an investigation, trying to determine whether past environmental damage had made the trees in the area unstable, putting other campers at risk. News of Cadence's passing sent shockwaves through Paul, Idaho, and beyond. In response, the devastated community rallied together. A GoFundMe page was set up to help the Easton family with funeral costs and other expenses, and within days, more than $28,000 had been raised. In the face of unimaginable loss, the Eastons found themselves surrounded by love and support, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, kindness and compassion endure. Yet, no amount of condolences or financial aid could erase the pain of what happened that night. The reality was cruel and irreversible. A family had gone into the woods seeking peace, only to leave with a wound that would never fully heal. Cadence Easton's story is a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile life can be, how, in an instant, everything can change. And as her loved ones grieve, they hold on to the memories of a little girl whose spirit burned bright, even in the face of tragedy. For Lisa Schilling and her 12-year-old daughter, Lily Aguilo, Buckhorn Canyon wasn't just a place. It was a tradition, a sanctuary, a slice of untouched nature where the worries of city life faded away. It was where they had laughed around campfires, watched the stars from their trailer, and made countless cherished memories with their loved ones. But on July 15th, 2022, what was meant to be another peaceful getaway turned into an unthinkable tragedy. Lisa, a dedicated 4th-grade teacher, was set to start a new chapter at Bear Creek Elementary. Lily, on the cusp of turning 13, was eagerly counting down the days to her birthday. Neither of them knew they had only hours left to live. That Friday afternoon, the sky darkened, and a steady rain began to fall. It didn't seem alarming at first, just another passing summer storm, but hidden in the mountains, nature was brewing a silent catastrophe. The rain triggered a deadly chain reaction. The Cameron Peak fire, which had ravaged the area 2 years earlier, had left the soil loose and unstable. Now, with every drop of rain, the mountainside weakened. Then, at 5 p.m., it happened. A thunderous, gut-wrenching roar ripped through the canyon, a sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone at the campsite. Annette Vasquez, Lisa's sister-in-law, froze in horror as she turned to see a nightmare racing toward them, a monstrous wall of water. Mud, boulders, and uprooted trees came thundering down the creek, a flash flood so powerful, so merciless, that it was unstoppable. Lisa and Lily were inside their trailer when the flood hit. There was no warning, no chance to run. In mere seconds, the churning mass of destruction lifted the trailer off the ground, tossing it like a toy in its unrelenting grip. The terrified screams of mother and daughter vanished beneath the deafening roar of the flood as their home away from home was swallowed by the raging current. Onlookers could do nothing but watch in helpless terror as the trailer was ripped away, disappearing into the chaos. And just like that, Lisa and Lily were gone. The Larimer County Sheriff's Office received frantic calls about the flood around 5 p.m., but by the time rescuers arrived, the devastation was already irreversible. For 2 long hours, search teams scoured the flooded canyon, hoping, praying that Lisa and Lily had somehow survived. But as darkness began to fall, hope slipped away. At 7:30 p.m., they found them. Lisa and Lily's bodies were discovered more than half a mile away from their campsite, washed down the canyon by the relentless floodwaters. Their beloved dogs, who had been in the trailer with them, were gone too. The flood stole more than 2 lives that day. It shattered an entire family. Lisa's husband, already grieving from recent losses, was now faced with the unbearable reality that his wife and daughter were never coming home. Friends and family rushed to support him, setting up an online fundraiser to help with funeral expenses. Within days, the GoFundMe campaign had raised nearly $14,000 out of its $25,000 goal, a testament to the community's love for Lisa and Lily. But no amount of money could undo the devastation.